Hello everyone, I'm Cinay and welcome to this week's Technotalk. Here we discuss STEM-related topics with special guests to inform people and give them our perspective on modern concepts. Without further ado, let's get our special guest of the week. Hello, Mr. Paul.
Hello, Cinay. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you very much. It's really nice to be here.
You too. So first off, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I work now as a guidance counsellor and teacher at Bahcesehir High School for Science and Technology. But before that, first of all, I studied modern languages and literature at Cambridge University until master's level. And then I worked in a number of countries as a language teacher. I've taught both English and other languages, including French, German, and Russian, in many different countries: Belgium, Germany, Saudi Arabia. And then I returned to the UK for a second master's at Durham University in Middle Eastern and International Relations. And I studied Arabic as part of that. So like I've had different languages, and I'm now teaching obviously here at Bahcesehir High School for Science and Technology.
That's great. It's very impressive. So let's discuss today's topic, new trends in language learning. Language is a way of communication that connects people and forms an open network. In recent years, technology has been used to both assist and enhance the language learning process. Students rapidly incorporate various forms of technology to support and engage in their learning. Further, some of the technological tools enable to, differentiate instruction and adapt activities and assignments, thus enhancing the language learning experience. Distance learning also programs can enable to expand language learning opportunities to all students, regardless of where they live. So, on this topic, let's find the answers of some of our questions with our special guest. So, firstly, what is the current role of technological instruments in language learning?
I think that you can divide them into different areas. I think the first type of tool is where they've taken technology and actually made things that would have had to take place in a very fixed environment possible online. For example, when I went to university, students would meet someone from another, for example, they would offer to give 1 hour of English, we'll meet in a cafe, speak English for half an hour, meet, let's say, a German student, and do a tandem. Now that's possible online. You can actually, there's now an app called Tandem. You can go on, you can find someone and talk to them. Obviously, things like the ability to access, for example, grammar support in that way. I mean, the most important thing is I think that you're able to, obviously Skype, Zoom and things like that have basically reduced space, so it's possible to tailor things much closely to you, to your needs. Second thing, obviously, is certain apps which are downloadable to your phone or to your tablet, which are almost based on a computer game concept, where you're trying to win shields, win points in order to compete against yourself. So it's very competitive. So it's bringing computer gaming elements into learning. And finally, there are lots and lots of courses being developed, teachers and non-teachers, in trying to tailor content for people's exact needs, what they need, and trying to do it in an interesting, interactive way.
Yeah, actually really well explained. I also think and consider that technology has the ability to enhance relationships between the student and the language. Receiving awards and having these types of, applications, and students are also able to collaborate with their own proficiency progress and levels, and level up. Yeah, exactly. And so the technological applications makes this process more efficient and enjoyable at the same time.
Yeah, so for example, it actually opens doors to people that maybe weren't particularly interested in the traditional way of learning. That
definitely.
What they would normally play a computer game, they use it in order to learn something educationally beneficial.
Yeah, true. So as a multilingual speaker, is there a way to formalize this whole process and the language learning process like a mathematician?
Well, what's interesting about many of these apps is that they actually work on some systems that were popular like back in the 60s and 70s. For example, there used to be a series of books where you basically sort of transition drills, substituting, moving one sentence backwards, simple translation methods, not particularly a concept, but very quick, getting the brain, you know, to fill in information and things like that. Those systems that were used back in the 60s and 70s, before you had communicative teaching, actually have been reincorporated into the apps. And what's interesting is that a lot of students are really into that, whereas if you gave them, I remember a couple of years ago, one of my students wanted a language book from me. I took them one of those old-fashioned books and they looked at it and they didn't quite know what to do. But when it's put in an interactive, in a computer, like on your phone, and it's got graphics and you're working against the time or whatever, it puts it in a new kind of context with a new wrapping, so to speak. Yeah. What's interesting is that the actual concepts behind it, many of them are based on the past. The second thing is many of the apps are actually based on psychology techniques. If you look at a lot of the stuff on the internet, they talk about things like why are you learning, how do you feel, and things like that, as well as actually, you know, cognitive processing, for example, to learn vocabulary, time-based repetition. So, for example, the computer calculates, or the program calculates how many words you can remember, you know, when actually, you know, your memory decay when you forget words, which often English teachers forget about. They talk about it maybe, we talk about it as English teachers, but we don't really explain to students how to learn words, how to learn grammar, how to practice, whereas these programs actually incorporate some interesting psychological techniques. So there's that aspect to look at as well, you know.
So to kind of, let's say, formalize it, I think that some students differ in understanding. Some people like to understand it through grammar, and some people like to be in that specific atmosphere. So it kind of varies also.
Well, definitely, there's this debate is actually can be seen in the two kinds of programs. So, for example, in terms of the apps that I've just talked about, they're very structural. You work on structures, how simple sentences are formed, word order, and so on. You know, substituting words, checking that you're getting it right. So this is the idea that, for example, I went to a lecture about this about 10 years ago by Professor Ian Whittington. He said that you have to actually learn the structures first before you can go on. And lots of students want to be happy with that. And there is a mathematical, there's an element of mathematics to that. You know, there are certain sentences and so on. Some other people, the people who are using more things like YouTube, are actually saying, no, you should use it to gain confidence, make mistakes in learning, and so on. You know, expose yourself to as much real, how can I say, authentic content as possible, rather than so you actually get used to the rhythms of the language, the sounds of the language, the patterns of the language, almost subconsciously, that you're not actually, a lot of the people on YouTube, a lot of the stuff is very controversial. Throw your grammar book away, burn your grammar book. I mean, I have a Mexican friend who showed me a clip last week. She's a Spanish teacher. She showed me a clip of somebody actually, there's a guy saying, you don't need any grammar to learn Spanish, burn the grammar book, throw it away, rip it up. Yes, like that Code Society kind of thing. So the thing is that, you know, this is the complete opposite extreme. And obviously, whatever the students, if I think of my own students, the students who are mathematically and structurally motivated will actually go towards the structured apps, and maybe the students who are more chatty, conversational, more communicative will go towards those kind of guys on YouTube. I think there's a sensible mean. I think there's a sensible mean in the middle. I think 70-30% rule which a lot of people are talking about, you know, 20% should solid grammar and vocabulary learning, 80% or 70% maybe practice listening, speaking, writing, reading, etc. Keep the skills going, but always, you know, bolster them with the online resources. Because I think with the online resources, it's also easy to easily get help with the grammar point that you need just by Googling it in. So the internet in itself becomes a resource.
Yeah, and I also think that some students like us kind of prefer to be more into the language, as like in TV shows, watch these type of things. Maybe some people like to read books to learn. So yeah, us students vary in language learning a lot. So to find their own, let's say, liking of how to learn a subject is kind of has a lot of variety as well.
Again, I mean, there's one famous YouTube channel where the guy says a language can't be taught, it can only be learned. So for example, this guy, he takes a clip from, for example, a French TV channel, like on Netflix series, he cuts it off 5 minutes, he analyzes a point of grammar or a point of vocabulary from there. Now, I personally find that the most useful way to learn.
True.
So, passive listening, but also he cuts the clip out and then he explains that 5 minutes every day about, for example, like the Netflix series Lupin. He explains how that the slang is used in that Netflix series, or he takes a passage. He was an Italian teacher. He took the biography of Arnold Schwarzenegger and then he did the same thing, but giving the person tasks to use the language afterwards, rather than a whole Netflix series. Watch 6 hours of Netflix or watch 6 hours of BBC or something and then try to like remember all the English. No, I don't think that works, but I think manageable chunks definitely do.
Yeah.
And Netflix is another really, those kind of TV channels. You can watch channels from anywhere in the world is in itself a resource, isn't it?
True, definitely. I also wanted to point out like the importance of vocabulary. Like, do you have any tips or like crucial points in how vocabulary is very, very important in language learning?
Well, I mean, I personally believe that the first thing, like as I said before, I don't think that we talk enough with students about how to learn vocabulary. So, for example, if I think back to the teachers that were the most effective with me, they focused a lot on vocabulary. So, for example, a whole load of techniques, whatever's the best way to remember words, collocations, and so on. The other thing which I think is useful, and there's a German YouTuber who does this, what you call subject talking and vocabulary learning. So you choose a subject, a lot of input, vocabulary based around a particular topic. Let's say you're very interested in football, you would watch a lot of football, read a lot about football.
Yeah.
Plus, you'd also have constant vocabulary with collocations coming in as a resource, which you can use when you're speaking. So he actually encourages the student to have the vocabulary list with him. And it's not just a vocabulary list, but it's a memory map with lots of things coming up, where the student can use that vocabulary and recycle it, because every word has to be used again.
Yeah.
The problem that I find, maybe my memory doesn't work that way, but the way my memory works is to have it around a topic and recycle it, and read, listen, speak about the same topic. So I think that was the way that definitely the teachers who were the best for me did it. And it's definitely the way that the YouTube, I will watch something about the topic that I'm interested in, learn vocabulary from it, then give you a task to recycle the vocabulary. So for example, the YouTuber will say, okay, now we've talked about, for instance, hospitals.
Yeah.
He talks about his daughter going to hospital, and then he says, okay, talk about the last time someone from your family went to hospital. So you also personalize it as well.
True.
But also, like, the apps allow this. So there are apps that allow you to create your own flashcards, your own memory prompts, highlight things. There's also there's a Canadian website that, for example, it highlights the words that you don't know in a reading text, finds similar words, similar texts with the same words, and then when you've seen that word before, it lights that word up in different colors, like verbs, permutations of that word, like words with the same root and everything. That it allows you to store them, and then it even does it by subject. But this is by a guy who has a completely different philosophy when he says reading comes first. So you have all these different ideas on the internet, and it's a debate. But the interesting thing is the debate's being played out in a sort of practical way. It's not just an academic debate; it's a practical debate as well through the technology.
Yeah, you clarified very great points in the subject. So like in conclusion, like it varies to every person. Some people like the speaking part, some people like prefer to do the readings part as to go about like the language learning process. So actually, to kind of conclude in our last question, can you give students who are in the language learning process or aim to learn a new language 3 crucial tips?
Okay, these are basically my ideas. I've slightly refined them after, I would say I thought differently when I was a teenager, but how I would think now is basically this way. Definitely set yourself a very, very clear objective, short term and long term. Set yourself a target to move towards. That could be a famous person, someone who you admire. You know, if you were learning English, maybe you want to speak English like, I don't know, Barack Obama or something like that. So set him, or maybe a famous football player or a famous pop star, use that as your target and move towards it. Always analyze yourself within that. So, for example, are there certain targets you can talk, certain things you can talk about, but you can't talk about other things? For example, in Turkish, even though I've lived in Turkey for a long time, certain subjects I've never talked about.
Yeah.
One of my New Year's resolutions is to try to talk about those topics. So analyze it. The second thing I would say is turn your life as much as possible into that and set times for, so for example, if you're really into football, watch Real Madrid matches in Spanish or watch Liverpool matches in English, which is what my best students do anyway. The best students in the class, the students who can speak the best English, I think students, the ones who like football, they watch a Liverpool match in English, or they follow Eurosport in English, or there was a very good student, you know, maybe you're interested in fashion, watch fashion TV. But basically turn your life, what you would do in your own language. Finally, set yourself very, especially as you go on, as you advance, identify the areas you don't know and then work on those. Don't be vague. So most of my students think I'm quite vague, listen to football matches or whatever, but watch football matches. But actually, I actually think you have to kind of set yourself some learning targets as well. Like today, I will learn, I don't know, 12 words about football, as well as I will listen to Eurosport, I will read a football magazine article. Small things that you can do in your lunch hour, on the service bus to school, at a weekend when, you know, listen to podcasts when you're walking on your phone or whatever. Just little things, little bits, you know, little bits, how can I explain? You know, every drop basically accumulates until it becomes like the lake, so to speak. So I would say, yeah, try to do it that way. Little manageable amounts rather than like try to kill yourself, sort of doing too much.
Yeah, basically, I think adapting to the language as much as you can, even like listening to podcasts or getting in the language environment is very important for students.
Well, I think this is the final thing I'll say. I think it's also a matter of authenticity. So one of the final things I would say about the technology is many of these writers of YouTube materials, podcasts on Spotify, etc., they've identified the fact that the listening texts tend to be, or the material tends to be unauthentic. It's non-authentic. Whereas listening to stuff as maybe teenagers would listen to. When I was a teenager, that was absolutely impossible. I would have had to ask a French person to record their voice or a German person to record their voice.
Yeah.
But nowadays, so many podcasts, they're just normal teenagers. The best stuff, in my opinion, is being done by like 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Much better, like, yeah, definitely. Talking about as a teenager, talking in a natural way, and in a way that's accessible input for teenagers.
Yeah. So the tips you mentioned and pointed out are surely logical components for a well-planned and strategic language learning atmosphere. So
Definitely.
Yeah. So, well, that was another informative discussion. Thank you again so much to Mr. Paul for joining us this week.
Thank you very much, Cinay. It's really a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, dear viewers, don't forget to keep up with our posts and additional events on our page, Technotalks and YouTube channel. And if you haven't watched last week's video, please go and check it out. See you next week with another interesting tech topic. Bye.
Bye.